Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing quite well, thank you.
Good.
Ready and raring to solve another problem, or the continuation of the previous problem. Of course, there is only one problem, the contest between people who believe in liberty and limited government with the people who think that they know it all, and most people are stupid to take and won't take care of themselves. So we need somebody to take care of us, to make sure that we get some food and clothing and a house, because governments aren't capable of doing it. I mean, people can't do it, so the government has to do it for them. Lo and behold, everything you look at, everything from foreign policy on down to social policy, you can always point out the failures, but continually they feed this to the masses, and the masses say, take care of us. You know, it was rather disturbing to me a little bit because AOC is offering all free stuff forever and ever. You'd think maybe even liberals would say, you know, maybe there's a limit.
Yeah,
what she did was she got 75% of the vote.
Yeah.
So we do have a big problem, although there are some victories out there, and we point to those, and I always want to lean in that way. There are rumblings, and that good ideas sometimes are really quiet for a while, but as long as they're out there, we're in good shape, because eventually we'll have to substitute for what we have here. But I guess just yesterday there was a ruling on the Flynn case, and he won it. You know, he won it, and here this was a terrible, terrible ordeal, and of course he suffered from it, but really the country suffered, the judicial system suffered, because the way I see this, you know, Russiagate and everything with Flynn, it was all part of a conspiracy to overthrow the government. And they were getting pretty close. I mean, when they got Flynn in jail, they thought they had clear sailing. But really, the only thing that blocked him was the fact that Hillary wasn't president.
Yeah.
Think how much less informed we would be if she wasn't president. We give Trump a lot of grief, and he deserved a lot of it too.
Yeah.
But in a way, just, you know, if you compare the two, we've gotten more information with Trump being president than we ever would have with Hillary. But Flynn, his case was dismissed on appeal in the appellate court, and I think it's fantastic, because there's been so many rulings, especially during the Russiagate thing, that was always against justice. There's the investigations from the very beginning were not about justice, and it would be nice to think there was purity on one side and impurities on the other side, but you know we can't even deal with that. It's power versus non-power, and the Republicans obviously, I think, come across a little bit more concerned, but they themselves, once they're in office, I mean, sometimes the deep state controls both parties and a big appointment, but because everything is failing, we're in the midst of this financial and moral bankruptcy. Everything is up for grabs, so it's not as easy for them to say that Republicans and Democrats, and they listen to all the orders, because things are failing, and that's why this turmoil shouldn't surprise us at all. I mean, the adjustment's going to be delayed. It's sort of during the 30s, we had an introduction to what happens when the correction becomes necessary for making all the mistakes. And the more you interfere and not allow corrections, the liquidation and the adjustment, the longer it lasts and the worse it gets. So we're in the middle of that, and it's going to be very hard to say, well, let's quit trying. Let's let everybody go back to work. And we can't even allow people to get back to work from the coronavirus, which should be an easy call, because there's every bit of effort to keep that out in the news. And I think it's part of the conspiracy against Trump. Blame Trump for this. And evidently they're from their viewpoint, they're doing a pretty good job.
They are. And I'd just like to start by welcoming all of our live commenters and especially super chatters to the show. Our live audience means a lot to us, and we appreciate them on board. But this is really a blockbuster, because, Attorney General Barr, a couple of months ago, I believe it was, originally moved to have the case dismissed. And the judge who was ruling on it said, no way, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to hire a lawyer, and I'm going to keep fighting this thing. And this came out after more information came out suggesting that the FBI knew and they even discussed setting a perjury trap to get Michael Flynn fired. They needed a scalp, and he was the low-hanging fruit. Setting a perjury trap, they even said it. He said no, so they went to the appeals court, and the appeals court just ruled that yes, the case will be dropped. And that's not all, though. Some more explosive information came out, and that's why we even talk about coup. We've said it before, but you cannot look at these, especially the handwritten notes from FBI agent Peter Strzok, who was at the center of all this. You cannot look at these and not say, this coup went to the highest levels. In fact, let's look at the first, this is a handwritten note from Peter Strzok. This is part of the case, and it's difficult to read, but essentially, you have the vice president. These are Strzok's notes of the conversation. The vice president said, basically, let's charge him under the Logan Act. You had the president talking about, we need to have the right people on this case. Then you have Comey saying, the Flynn Kislyak, who's the Russian ambassador, these talks appear legitimate. And let's do the next slide, because this is this handwriting, and this is actually from the notes of the case. Strzok's notes, believed to be on January 4th, 2017, reveal that former President Obama, James Comey, Sally Yates, Joe Biden, and apparently Susan Rice discussed the transcripts of Flynn's calls and how to proceed against him. Mr. Obama himself directed that, quote, the right people, end quote, investigate Flynn. This caused former FBI Director Comey to acknowledge the obvious. General Flynn's phone calls with Ambassador Kislyak appear legit, end quote, from Comey. This goes not only to Obama, but to Biden, who's trying to get another job right now. They're plotting a coup against the president just a little over a week before the inauguration.
Yeah, I see a lot of moral corruption here. And one example of that is Joy Behar. Here she's bragging. Well, when my husband and I go out, we look for these bad people. They don't have their mask on. They're not practicing, social distancing, as if that made a difference and as if it was against the law. But no, she's bragging about this, that they go out and literally look for it, which is a suggestion that her idea of justice is having government spy on us. I thought that was part of a totalitarian society. So in a way, she is an authoritarian willing to do obedience if the people in the government are her kind of people. So she's quite willing to do that or try to get rid of somebody she doesn't like. And I think this is sort of fits in because it's part of destroying people when the rule of law is helpful to them, and that's why the rule of law is so weak. This is why we want to emphasize this, that it's weak, but it's not dead.
Yeah.
We just need more people understanding what civil liberties are all about, and maybe they should read the Constitution and at least believe in it. But there's not much of that goes on because the defense of civil liberties and the defense of the Constitution usually comes outside the government. Both parties are pretty weak on that because they're violating those principles. But so evidently we had some justices that decided that they went too far, and they said, "Hey, back off."
Yeah, it's really remarkable when you see. First of all, as you suggested in your opening, what's happened to Flynn over these past 3 years, what kind of conditions he's been in. Of course, his personal financial loss and being involved. You can't really count the emotional strain of facing years in jail, knowing you've done nothing wrong. And all of this to start the Trump administration off on the wrong foot, to push the idea that Trump sent out his minions to make contact with the Russians because it really was Putin that got Trump elected. And it's amazing, and it seems like the ball would be in Barr and even Trump's court now. What are you going to do about it? This rot goes straight to the head of the fish. I mean, they were plotting this, and it's fascinating. Anyway, we're keeping our eye on this, but we're also keeping our eye, as we talked about earlier, on a Wall Street Journal editorial that came out today. Switching gears a little bit to coronavirus, they talked about lockdown versus non-lockdown states. And I'm sure you saw the article and found it pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I want to just mention a little bit about the taking over of a government. That's sometimes referred to as a coup. Most of the time people think of it, a coup has to be violent with guns and bullets. But it is a lot of violence because it's using force. But in this case, it was a coup that was designed by illegal charges and arrests made, and defying the rule of law. So yes, we need to talk a little bit more about the Wall Street Journal's article, because there they mentioned that. I think this is interesting. If you compare, and we do a lot of this, you're good at this, comparing the states that lock down to the states that don't lock down.
Yeah.
And this is not a shocker, but it's a surprise that it's a surprise it was in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, good for them.
And coming up with something, because I believe what they're saying. 75% of the people, they're 75% lower of death rates in the states that don't lock down.
Yeah.
Everything is better. Yeah. And of course we pointed out the countries and the states that had the least amount of regulations, they were the ones that have survived, economically too. And just think of the states that used a lot of lockdown. Our governor here hasn't done so well now. He's talking about, well, we got to put them on again. And the market took a little break, and it looked like it was going down, which is the natural, probably the normal thing under the conditions that we have. So immediately when the market starts down, guess what? There's another coronavirus crisis coming up. It's worse than ever. A second phase of this, and therefore more money. They're talking about spending trillions of dollars more. The Fed is busy doing this, and they are very busy doing this with making sure that we totally bankrupt the country and totally destroy our civil liberties. And this is a contest going on because there's more and more people right now who would just as soon go and watch a football game and why don't they just legalize choices?
Yeah.
Let them go in if they want and take their own risk. But no, there's going to be these individuals obsessed with the controls that they would like to put on us.
And the Wall Street Journal editorial was citing a new report done by a nonprofit, Kansas nonprofit called the Sentinel, and they just looked at the statistics between the 42 lockdown states and the 8 non-lockdown states, non-shutdown states. And it is fascinating in terms of jobs. Private employment in the non-lockdown states dropped by 7.8% from May of 19 to May of 20. 7.8% drop in the non-lockdown states. That sounds pretty bad. But looking at the 42 lockdown states, in that same period, 13.2% drop in private employment, almost twice as much drop. Job loss in lockdown Colorado, 9.5%, non-lockdown Utah, 4.6%. That is just about twice as much job loss. And as you point out, the per capita fatalities were 75% lower in non-lockdown states. So they kept their jobs, they died a lot less, and they're overall better. And you could say, well, a lot of these were rural states, they weren't packed together like in New York. Yeah, of course, there are factors to think about. But there's also factors to think about in lockdown states like the nursing home massacre, which is something that really needs to be investigated. You would really be erasing half of the deaths in the country if you dealt with the fact that they forced sick people to go in with healthy people and infect and kill them. But anyway, the case is the numbers are there despite the hysteria, despite, even here in Lake Jackson, there are signs going up on the store. You better wear a mask or you can't come in. My wife was at the store today. She said, okay, I won't go. I'll go somewhere else. And that's okay until there are no somewhere else's.
Right.
But the hysteria is catching on. But if you objectively and soberly look at these numbers, there really is no reason for the panic.
Behar was arguing the case that, she doesn't have enough tools. We can't lock them up fast enough. We can't quarantine people. We need more authority. And she says the only thing left to protect us is have people wear their mask and also social distancing. And so she probably really believes this stuff, and so she's out there and being the police person of the world. But, Oregon, they're not going to quit. They're sort of fanatical on this. So they decided, we have to have masks, and we're going to mandate masks across the state, which is totally illegal as far as I'm concerned with our Constitution and the rule of law. But anyway, they've been doing that, or they intimidate and scare people to death to wear their mask. But they knew there must be something wrong with it, because they said, but this is not for black people. The minorities don't have to do it, just white people. Now, how's that going to happen? How does that coincide with their belief? If not wearing a mask is dangerous, what do you think they're trying to do? Are they want to increase the exposure of disease and deaths with the minorities they claim they're protecting? It just doesn't make any sense at all. And if they, of course, there's no concern at all about civil liberties. I mean, how can anything be more racist than this? And nobody says boo. They just say, oh, okay, that's good. Oregon, they have their states' rights, but they don't have a state's right to just trash the Constitution. There are some liberties protected for everybody in this country, but I think that is rather ironic that they are so bold as to say that, they care. If they care more about minorities, why wouldn't they say, well, we don't care about white people, what we want to do is mandate it for black people? I mean, the thing doesn't make any sense.
It is insane. And one other little thing on Behar, and we're picking on her because she deserves it. We have a clip of the article just so people know we're not making it up. We didn't wake up one morning in a grouchy mood. Joy Behar says she and her husband drive around looking for people not wearing masks. She said, all I do is get in my car, maybe with Steve, that's her husband, and we go around looking for people who are not wearing masks. I mean, that's sick. If you think about it, it reminds you maybe when the Soviets took over, people would go driving around looking for kulaks. Or, when the Nazis were shutting businesses, driving around looking for Jewish-owned businesses to report so they could put those stars on the front. I mean, it's the same kind of mentality. Of course, that's to the extreme, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And you think about someone like Joy Behar. Okay, she is mad that everyone is not staying home and saving lives and not getting out and not going to work. It doesn't matter if they lose their salaries. What's wrong with them? Well, guess what? It doesn't apply to her. I looked her up. She makes $7 million a year hosting The View. She gets her salary, but she drives around looking for the poor guy who's trying to keep his beauty parlor alive, his haircutting shop alive, and all this, and she's reporting them for not putting their masks on. I think that's pretty sick.
Well, back to this whole thing about designating who has to take masks and exempt certain races. It seems to me like that would increase racial strife. This whole thing. But you would think the people that would be, challenging us a little bit are the minorities. Why do they care less about the minority? Oh, we don't care about you, so we're going to let you do a dangerous thing. But all these efforts to try to manage a lockdown and then manage a lockup, unlocking it, systematically and fairly. And some people say, well, we'll do it fairly and we'll find out who needs to be and, the people who are very necessary and this sort of thing. But there's an easy thing to do this is, why don't we just have rules for no one? We can't say you do, but not you. Why don't we let people make up their decision? I mean, that's what would happen in a free society. And most of the time, people we've lived for a lot of years with a lot of seriously ill people where we haven't had lockdowns. And the infections and endemics have actually been worse than what we have now. And this one is winding down, even though they might, because of testing and because the virus is weaker, you might have more cases. But it is not a reason to renew the lockdown. And they're sending the message, and of course the stock market really went to the dogs once they made these announcements.
Yeah, well, people are ready. Well, the Oregon one, we want to show proof here. We're real news, not fake news. And here's the next clip. This is from the New York Post. Oregon County, and I've been told this is statewide, issues face mask order that exempts non-white people. And the reason why it does, and actually we can go to the next clip, this is the actual order, and you can see it's from the website from Lincoln County. The following individuals do not need to comply with this directive: You go down to the bottom, it says, people of color who have heightened concerns about racial profiling and harassment due to wearing face coverings in public. Now, that's a political decision that some black people might be hesitant because of stereotypes to wear a face mask in public. But that's a politicization of the virus. And so the question would be, there's only one of two things possible. Either the face masks don't save lives, which they tell us they do, or Oregon wants black people to die. You know, it's one of the two things. Either it's just theater to show your compliance, or they don't care if black people die. I mean, it's one of the two. Sorry if you feel the stereotypes because of this, but unfortunately the masks are so important that we have to tread on your civil liberties so much that, sorry, you're just going to have to take it because you literally will die if you don't wear it. We suspect that's not the case.
You know, I've always argued about debating legislation in Congress that nobody really wants to hear a moral argument or a constitutional argument, and sometimes they'll listen to a pragmatic argument. But think about this on pragmatism in the sense that how does it happen? I've already mentioned I think it's going to increase racial strife.
Yeah.
But what about the people that they're supposed to be protecting? Are they going to all of a sudden say, "Oh, I don't have to wear that," but they tell me I have to wear it? Oh, I don't have to wear it. It seems like in a pragmatic way, some people are going to wake up, especially if we go another month or two and they don't have hardly any deaths to report anymore.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? They say, "Hey, it's time to play baseball." It's time to do something else because, of course, our governor said, "Stay at home." There's an increase. We don't want you to stay. I don't want you to stay home. I want to be able to go out, and I'd like to go to a park. I don't go to baseball games, but I think everybody has a right to go to see a baseball game. And I don't believe if you go to an open-air baseball field with a lot of people, that all of a sudden you're going to come down with coronavirus.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some, but maybe even if they didn't go to the park, maybe there would have been more stay-at-home or congregations that were, just inevitable. And so it makes no sense. It's not even pragmatic, and maybe the lack of pragmatism on this might wake up more people. Maybe they'll begin to say, enough is enough. Let's quit playing this game because it has not been necessary. And they do admit, like Behar is saying, well, all we have are the mask and social distancing. We need more. We need more American spies to take care of this until we get the vaccine. She's waiting on the vaccine.
Yeah.
Right in front of the line.
Well, you talk about going to a baseball game, and you make it, even if you did go to a game and caught the virus at the game, 99.8% of people who catch the virus survive it. And you'll never know that hearing the media. But you take that 99.8% who survive, and then you subtract out those who are above 80 years old and who are ill, and you're going to have it going down more and more and more. It'd be 99.999 probably if you take out those. So you'd never know it watching the mainstream media. But the fact is, people are not dropping in the streets of this disease. It's just not happening. And in fact, I was over at the CDC page today looking around, see if they had any fresh charts out there. And they do report the information pretty well. In fact, let's look at this next chart. This is interesting. I found this. This is nationwide during week 24, which is the week we're in. 0.8% of patient visits reported through INET. These are the influenza-like illness, which would include parts of coronavirus. The percentage is well below the national baseline of 2.4. The percentage of visits for ILI in week 24 remains low among all age groups. And you look at that chart. These are percentage of visits to the doctor for influenza-like illnesses, and it goes to June 13th, 2020. And if you look at it, it's below the baseline, below the 2019-2020 baseline. Of course, they're contributing. They say it is the social distancing that's doing this. We would say it's simply the virus dying. And finally, Dr. Paul, my last word will be yet another reminder of why Texas is finding so many cases. Let's look at this final, again, let's look at the final clip. Why are they finding so many cases? They're going insane with testing. They're desperate. They're testing everything that moves. They're like the president of Tanzania testing a piece of fruit and a monkey, you know. They're testing everything and finding everything has coronavirus. So that's why you're getting more cases, and we're not trying to make light of it. But we are a little bit frustrated over the fact that states like Texas and others, they're essentially over this. There may be more cases, but the death rate is very low. There are some variations, but overall the death rate is going way down. There's not a second wave. This is a continuation of the first wave, which they postponed by not allowing people to get the virus, which, as we say, is not a very deadly virus. It's as deadly or maybe less deadly than the flu, and that's what we're dealing with. If people would wake up and stop being hysterical, take a deep breath and look around, they'd find that out, and we might be able to rescue a little bit of our country back. So thank all of you for watching the Liberty Report. And here's Dr. Paul to finish up.
Very good. You know, there was a book written a long time ago, and it was called Extraordinary Popular Delusions. And I think this is going to fit in. As years go by and we study this, the reason you can't talk about this is the fact that somebody said you don't care about people and that sort of thing. But now the evidence is coming out that our position means that you are less likely to get the disease and die from it. So it's not this thing that if you take a more reserved position on this and allow people their liberties to make their own decisions, that more people aren't going to die. So it's something that people will, though, they'll use that. But I think the reaction, not the virus. The virus is very real, and when you pack some people into a nursing home, it's very dangerous and kills a lot of people. But that's bad government management, is what it is. But it's a very serious problem always. But I think where we really have an extraordinary popular delusion has been the reaction to this. It's just nuts as far as I'm concerned on what they're doing, and no concern about civil liberties. But of course, some of us believe this is not just bad judgment. This is deliberate. I mean, this goes along, with the financial bursting of the market and the malinvestment and the debt that we have, and this is sort of a distraction from that. And yet it is something that I think is way overboard, and I can just imagine, the pictures already, they're mocking this whole thing and making fun. I can imagine if somebody 5 or 10 years from now says, I think I'm going to do a paper on the reaction to coronavirus in 2020. I think they're going to come up with something that's going to say, where were these people? What were they thinking about? Why did they have to do this? It'd be easier to defend the NSA than it's going to be to defend it. At least, we had a real event that people got concerned about, even though they went the wrong way and didn't find out why we had the 9/11 attack. But anyway, there was more of a justification there, and people could see it, and a lot of problems. But now people are going along with this and rolling over, and who knows how this will work out. But we have a ways to go, and the only thing that we can combat this with is not more power and government power. It comes from more dissipation of the power, eliminating power and authority over people to make their own choices. And I think we'd all be much better off. But you can say that about so many things, our personal liberties. This is like saying, well, we have to have all these rules so that you have to wear a helmet when you ride your motorcycle and everything else because we're going to protect lives. There's no evidence that the government regulations actually saves lives. Most people, take their own risks, and people die from it. But I think it's conceivable, and this is a very risky statement, that in the years to come, they might say, well, when we look back at this looks like it was like a really bad cold, and it spread like a cold, and they couldn't even find the people, and they struggled to find them, so they could build up the fear mongering so that they have more lockdowns. And I just think that unfortunately more people think that Government has to take care of it. They're dependent on government. It means that you'll get more checks to be taken care of. It'll justify the medical care that they get. Instead of saying, I believe that we'd be much better off if government wasn't involved in medical care, and the government shouldn't be involved in education. The government shouldn't be involved in churches. Now they're closing down the churches. This sort of thing. So I hope there's a lesson out there to be learned, and we'll do our best to try to fully understand this and let people know that you don't have to sacrifice liberty to be safe. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.